Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Hal. Play action. Hal will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Hal, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Hal at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it. Tries to roll it apart. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson. For the touchdown. They are going to play left-handed. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Dio at the 35. Dio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Dio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys. As always, coming at you on a Wednesday night here. And in addition to the podcast that was supposed to be a relatively short edition of the podcast, now has 2 storylines that we have to talk about before we get to the interview with David Hale, which you will hear coming up live here on this edition of the podcast. So make sure you stick around for that. Some great stuff from him on what he's hearing about the Bill Belichick saga and everything important that needed to be asked about what he is hearing. So make sure you stick around for that. But we have some recruiting to talk about here on this edition of the podcast. 2 recruiting notes that we have to get to from today. You have a decommitment in the 2027 class, and a commitment in the 2026 class. Carolina ends up flipping a guy from Miami. This one, pretty huge one for Carolina, so we'll tell you about that here coming up. But let's go chronologically what happened today. We'll start with the bad news for Carolina, and that is that they did lose the commitment of 2027 running back Amir Brown, the 4-star running back from in-state. He committed from Carolina earlier today. That after being committed to Carolina for about a month. That was the amount of time that he was a part of that 2027 class, and he was the headliner in that 2027 class for Carolina. Was a big keep in state. The thing is that when it comes to his recruitment, really seems like Carolina's probably in a pretty rough spot even after the decommitment. I do think that there is still a chance that he could end up coming back to Carolina at some point. I don't think it is 100% off the table. But it seems like this decommitment makes a lot of sense considering that he is scheduled to visit Notre Dame for their game against USC on Saturday night. And most people perceive that the team to beat for his services now becomes the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And if that is the case, then I certainly think that, he's a guy that Carolina is going to have trouble getting back. Notre Dame, team that has done a really good job of developing running backs over the last few years, a team that, with Jeremiah Love, the way that he's succeeding this year, could have one of the top running backs in this upcoming NFL draft. And then, when it comes to the on-the-field stuff for Carolina, and even the off-the-field stuff for Carolina, it makes a little bit of sense why he would potentially be looking into decommitting and looking to become a part of the Notre Dame recruiting class, especially with Marcus Freeman and the success that Notre Dame has had this year. Not off to the greatest start as they were 0-2 out of the gate, but they have turned things back in the right direction. And you never know. especially with Notre Dame, with that brand. They could end up sneaking back into the college football playoff, which is certainly a lot better than what Carolina is doing on the field this season. His decommitment comes in the middle of a junior season where he has been really, really good. 802 yards, 11 touchdowns on 102 carries. Also has 6 catches for 49 yards for Rolesville High School up there in Rolesville, North Carolina. Their season not going nearly as expected. They were hoping that they would be a team challenging to get back to the state title, and maybe they do end up actually challenging to get back there when it's all said and done. Of course, new classifications in the state of North Carolina this year, so a little bit more difficult than in years past to figure out who exactly is going to make it to these state championships, but certainly going to need to be a little bit better as a team than they've been to this point. But Amir Brown doing everything that he possibly can to continue to heighten his expectations and continue to trend up in those recruiting rankings. So certainly a guy that Carolina, I think, would love to get back on board. But I do think that Notre Dame is the team that's in the best position to land him, and that could happen as soon as this weekend. So with that loss for Carolina in the 2027 class, Carolina now in that class still, out of the gate early with the commitment. They do have Skylar Robinson still in that class. They do rank 46th in that class, according to 24/7 Sports composite rankings. So, it's still very, very early on that side of things. Of course, Carolina's trying to get some of those guys on board. It is significant that you lose an in-state guy, especially if you're going to lose him to an out-of-state school. But I don't think that's something that you should necessarily be panicked about. All right, now let's get to the good news. Let's get to the news that I think everybody is here and wants to talk about, and that is Kenton Dopson, who ends up flipping his commitment from Miami to Carolina. And this one's a big one, guys, in the 2026 class. A guy that's one of the top 5 players in the class, number 4 player for Carolina in their class, the number 158 overall recruit, and the number 17 cornerback commit in the 2026 class. He was a guy that was a part of the 2027 class, did reclassify last month, and ends up, landing with the Tar Heels. This was just a great job by the coaching staff, I think, of really pushing to land his commitment. They offered him back in August before the team took the field. They, brought him on campus for an official visit with the Richmond game. And, at the time, things were still okay. Carolina was still in a good spot. You felt like 2-1. Carolina was hopefully finding their footing, even though the game against Charlotte wasn't necessarily great. You thought that game against Richmond might have been what turned the season. Since then, things have not necessarily gone very well for Carolina, but they've been after it still, pushing hard to recruit Kenton Dopson. Now, the thing that you need to know about this one is that according to some of the Miami websites, I forget which website it was that wrote an article about him, and one of the biggest things that they said was that the belief was that the money played a big factor here, that Carolina was offering more money. That's the reason that he ends up coming to Carolina over Miami. Now, one, that should make you incredibly excited if you're a Tar Heel fan, because that shows you that the money is there. I have been one that, especially with this year's roster, really doubted that the money was there. To be honest with you, I thought that to this point, especially with the roster that was built, maybe the money really wasn't there. Maybe they were telling us that it was, and it didn't show up the way that they thought it would. But when you're going out and putting together this type of recruiting class, you're flipping guys from Tennessee, from Ohio State, now from Miami. It would lead you to believe that Carolina has a pretty good amount of money that they are sending these kids' ways. And so then you have to ask yourself the question of, are you okay with recruiting kids that are basically just out to make money? For a guy like Dopson, hopefully the talent ends up translating over. And if it does, Carolina is getting a really good player. I think that's one of the things that you need to recognize here is that while he is someone that is looking out for, the wallet and everything like that. He's also a really good player that brings a lot of talent with them and could be a very, very influential piece for Carolina in that defensive backfield as they look to rebuild that room with everything that they're going to have to do this offseason after losing a good portion of the guys back there. It's going to be at least 4 of 5 from the starting lineup that Carolina rolled out in the season opener that they're going to lose from this squad next season because you're going to be without both corners, both starting corners. Thad Dixon will be gone at the end of the season. Same thing with Marcus Allen. And so then there's going to be plenty of opportunity available for a guy like Dopson. He could be one that comes in and, takes one of those starting positions if he plays well enough. Now, it's bold. Starting a true freshman on the outside is incredibly risky. You know that Carolina is going to be looking in the transfer portal for guys as well, but it feels like there's going to be opportunity there for him. So I think those are two of the biggest things that probably led to the flip in the commitment was the playing time that's available to him and the money side of things. And I think that's just something that at this point, you have to become comfortable with if you are a college sports fan. There are going to be kids that are going to flip their commitment to schools or are going to commit to schools outright because you simply have the money. So, yeah, I in terms of the player, I really like what he brings to the table. 6'1", 185 pounds. So, again, fits what you're looking for on the outside. Corners don't have to be freakishly tall. You're looking for guys that just play long, that look long out there. That's exactly what Kenton Dopson does. I think, the thing that you like about him is very, very good in press man situations, very good in man coverage across the board, but especially in press man situations. He's not afraid to get up on the line. He's not afraid to get his hands on guys off the line of scrimmage and really knock them off of their original route. That's something that shows up a little bit, especially in his, I guess you would call it senior film for this year. That was something I noticed that stuck out to me. Now, granted, it was, not too long of a clip that I saw on him before I hopped on here to do this edition of the podcast. I'll have an article that will go up that'll detail him a little bit more. So make sure that you guys read that article later on in the evening. I'll put that up, probably about 30, 45 minutes after this edition of the podcast is over. But I mean, yeah, everything that I saw from him, I liked, the hips opening up. I think it looks very smooth. He gets in and out of breaks very quickly. That's something that you really like to see from a corner. And then I thought the physicality was there. That was one of the things that, really stuck out to me was, he comes up, he'll play the run game, he'll play the short passing game really well. He's very physical when it comes to tackling. And so I think that's certainly something that you like. And then, his ball skills look pretty good. He looks like a guy that has a nose for the football, does a really good job of high pointing the ball and coming down with it. And you're looking for guys that can create turnovers. That's one of the things that it feels like, for Carolina's defense, even if they weren't great in pass coverage, if they were able to create some turnovers here and there, it would certainly make things a lot easier on this group. That's not what you're seeing right now. It's still something that hopefully will come along as the season progresses for Carolina and could be what ends up leading them to some wins. But this is one that you really like because he's got that ability, and you're hoping that that's something that translates for him to the next level. So everything that you need to see from him really checks out. I think he's a tremendous player. And this is one that Carolina really worked hard on to get away from Miami. So this is a great job by this staff. You need to commend them for that. I mean, we've been very hard, very critical of this staff on this podcast here recently, and I think rightfully so. But this is a good job by them to go out and land a piece that Carolina really needed in this class. Because you look at the rest of this class, and in terms of the corners, you got Xavier Jackson, you've got Keegan Chapman, who I really like. And I think with Xavier Jackson, 6'1", 185 pounds himself, he's a guy that really projects well to the outside. But Keegan Chapman looks like more of a nickel corner at 5'11", 160. You've got some other guys that have some versatility, maybe like Jamarian Gordon, who could end up playing corner for you. He's listed as a safety as of right now, and you could need him at that position. And then you've got Marcellus Ryan, who is one of the long-standing commits for Carolina, been committed since January of this year. He's a guy that projects to the nickel at 5'10", 170 pounds. So with those smaller guys, you're not necessarily going to be able to see them play on the outside. You needed another guy out there. And Carolina's not done. It doesn't appear there. Looks like Jaziel Hart, who's a guy that Carolina had offered previously under Mac Brown. He ends up getting reoffered by the new staff. So that would show you that Carolina's invested in trying to go out and add another corner to this class. The other thing to remember is that C.J. Sadler, also a guy that they think could play some corner for them. He's a guy that's hoping to play both sides of the ball when he gets to the next level. But again, at 5'9", he's a guy that projects inside. So they could use, as many guys on the outside as possible as they try to replenish this room. And I think that's really what they're going to try to do is through the high school level, they're going to try to bring in as many guys as possible, not have nearly as many transfers as a year ago. They're going to bank on getting those guys out of the high school ranks that are ready to step up, that are ready to be a part of what they do next year. Whether that's a sound strategy or not, I think we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think it's necessarily the most sound strategy in terms of being able to compete immediately. But if this really is going to be a long-term build, I don't understand why you hired Bill Belichick to do that. But if it is going to be a long-term build and eventually someone's probably going to end up taking over for Bill and continuing to build off of what he was able to do here, then this is the right starting point for Carolina, is bringing in as many of these guys as possible, loading up this recruiting class, and then seeing whether or not you can get some of these young guys to star for you in their first year on campus. So as I mentioned, more on Kenton Dopson will be up on the website later on tonight at HeelToughBlog.com. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. All right, guys. Well, there's your look at the day on the recruiting trail for Carolina. Now it is time to turn to our interview with David Hale. We got a chance to speak with him earlier today. So let's get you to that interview here. And then we'll be back to close down the episode here after we go through that interview with him. So here's what we were talking about earlier today with David Hale, talking about the Bill Belichick saga. PN, he joins us here talking a little college football and, of course, talking about on this podcast the Tar Heels and everything that's going on with Bill Belichick. David, how's it going, man? I know we're in the midst of the season, and this seems to be the storyline that's taken the nation by storm here.
Yeah, I know. I said before the year when he was hired, the only bad outcome is if they're like a 7-5 team and they're basically Mac Brown again. I was like, if they're 10-2, that's great. We're gonna have a good story. If they're 2-10, oh, even better. That's gonna be a great story. Well, here we are. We're staring down the barrel of 2-10.
So with all the reports that are coming out, within the last week and everything like that, I know you put up a long Twitter post over the weekend, I think it was, or maybe it was earlier this week. And you were talking about, where things are at, what you've been hearing and everything like that. So, first of all, what do you make of the situation? And second, do you believe that these buyout talks that were being rumored actually happened?
I'll start with the second part. No, I don't think that they actually happened. Is there some grumblings inside Carolina that, boy, this probably wasn't a good idea? Yes, that has happened. And frankly, those were happening as Bill Belichick was being hired. This was not everybody's on board with this plan. There were strong voices against it who got dragged along. But look, as bad as it's been, it's 5 games in. And there are some very powerful people with very big egos who put their necks on the line to get Bill Belichick hired, who are not anywhere close to saying, we screwed up, let's get rid of him. Because that not just about Belichick and the team, but that's an ego check that I'm not sure that they're ready to make yet. And on the flip side, I don't think Bill's very happy there right now. But also, the most miserable Bill Belichick is the one from last year where he had nothing else to do. And if he doesn't have a job in TV doing football or a job coaching somewhere in football, I don't think he's going to leave or voluntarily. And at this point, he doesn't have those things. So to me, I don't think there is any exit strategy in the near term. As far as like what's happening that's gotten us here, I mean, this could be a very long show. But I think if you're boiling it down to one thing, it is a level of arrogance and hubris by Bill Belichick and Michael Lombardi to assume that they knew everything. And that shows up just in terms of talent acquisition, how you build out your staff, what you're coaching this team to do. But it also shows up in how they treated other people. And you know, look, Belichick being mean to the media is not a new story. We've been doing this one for a long, long time. And at the end of the day, there's lots of coaches who are hard on the media, and it doesn't make them bad coaches. You know, Nick Saban is certainly at the top of that list. But I think what you're seeing from how Belichick treats the media has been very reflective of how they've treated anyone who is not in their inner circle. And that inner circle is largely NFL guys. So they basically came into Chapel Hill and exercised the program of anyone with real insight into how college football works, because they assumed two things. One, you screwed up, that's why I'm here. And two, I know better, I don't need you. And so just a small example of that is when they came in, him and Lombardi basically gutted the recruiting support staff. And I'm not talking about like assistant coaches who used to do recruiting. I'm talking about like the people who booked hotels. They gutted it and then realized a few weeks in, we don't have enough people to make this operation work, and had to bring a number of those folks back in to just get the basics done. So, you know, it is a level of, I think, unwillingness to admit where your own shortcomings are, or to admit that other people who you don't trust may still have the best interests of this program at heart and be worth listening to, has been the biggest downfall of where they're at.
So when it comes to Lombardi, you know, how involved is he in terms of where the divide is? You know, I think everybody seems to put the blame on Bill Belichick, and I think rightfully so. But is Michael Lombardi really on that same plane in terms of the blame for where everything's at right now?
1,000%. Belichick really wanted to delineate jobs, and the job of building this program largely fell to Michael Lombardi. And I think the stories I've been told about his level of evaluation, I mean, The Athletic had a good story that led with an anecdote about Chandler Morris, the quarterback of Virginia, wanting to go play for Belichick, and Lombardi saying, no, that's not the kind of guy we want. You know, the quote that I was told by somebody that I think checks out pretty well here is that they had a bunch of money and had no idea how to spend it. And that falls on Michael Lombardi. At the end of the day, it is Belichick's decision who to surround himself with. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I talked to Teddy Bruschi before the season about this, and this was a positive conversation about all that Belichick could do for Carolina. But one of the things that he said is that it will be very important who the assistant coaches are and who the support staff is, because Belichick's a genius when it comes to looking at film and breaking down film and figuring out mismatches and all the things that you can do to beat another team. But you need a translator there, right? Like you need to take who Bill Belichick is and all the stuff that he knows and be able to translate that into something consumable by the average player. And if you look up and down that coaching staff and the support staff, it's not guys I would have hired to do this job. Mm-hmm. And Lombardi is at the top of that hill. And, you know, I said to somebody the other day, and I'm certainly not arrogant enough to tell Bill Belichick how to do his job, but from a PR standpoint, if you just wanted to buy yourself some runway here, right? If you're Bill Belichick and you realize, all right, year one, we screwed up. We need to redo. The way you buy yourself some runway is you fire Michael Lombardi, who I think a lot of people thought was not a great person to hire in the first place. And he has also been at the forefront of rubbing a lot of people the wrong way because he is just entirely transactional about everything, which That can fly in the NFL. I don't think it flies the same when you're talking about college players and their families, all of that. So you fire Lombardi, and it's like, okay, see, this is the mistake that we made. Not even a reflection on Lombardi, but just like, all right, he was not the right person for this job right now, and we're moving in a different direction here. And the entire Carolina fan base could sit back and say, like, all right, yeah, good. Bill understands that he made a mistake, and we'll be better next year. Bill will not do this. Like, I think that the loyalty factor is too strong for him to make that decision. And so, look, who knows when we get to the end of the year what this looks like. But the fact of the matter is, like, recruiting and talent evaluation for next year is happening right now, and the person doing it is Michael Lombardi. So if you think he is a linchpin to the problem here, which I think a lot of folks that I've talked to do, does not give you a ton of hope for what comes next.
So when it comes to this year's team, let's just focus on them for right now. Is it a lack of talent, or do you think it's the lack of culture that really is the difference? Because the thing is that I've been preached patience by many people within this fan base. But my counter is that it should look better than this. You look at, for example, Jake Dickert at Wake Forest, and I get it. He coached in college and brought some of his guys with him. But that team's 4-2, and everybody's feeling pretty good about where they're at. Do you look at this and say that it is just the lack of talent, or do you think that the lack of culture is really what's causing this?
No, and I've talked to several coaches who have coached against this team or studied the team in waiting to coach against them later this season. And yeah, there's a talent deficit there. There's no question. And it frustrates me to hear Belichick blame it basically on when he was hired, which is a few days later than other coaches got hired. But I look back, you know who got hired at a real bad time? Bill O'Brien last year at Boston College got hired in February after the second signing day. And that was a competent team last year that went to a bowl game. And Bill Belichick didn't inherit a complete trash roster the way that Deion Sanders did at Colorado. They'd been to 6 straight bowl games under Mac Brown. The job was never sold as you got to rebuild something from the ground up. The job was, we have been beating our heads on mediocrity and we want to be great. And that's, so again, part of that's messaging. And I thought Bubba Cunningham's quote of the frustration stems from the gap between the production and expectation. Well, the production, I think that's a fine conversation to have about whether it's where it should be or not. But the expectation is the thing Bill Belichick had 100% control over creating and didn't worry about that. But yeah, look, there is a talent deficit, but as I've talked to these coaches who've gone against them, like, there is just basic stuff like that you and I could go out on the field and with good coaching be able to execute. It's just about like play recognition. Like, you don't have to be a star. You don't have to be a 5-star guy to recognize a formation and react appropriately. You don't have to be a 5-star guy to put effort into tackling. Like, this is just, I mean, this is not even football 101 stuff. This is stuff that you should learn before you're allowed to take football 101. And it's hard to point to anything other than coaching for that.
Yeah, I mean, and you look, I think, you know, he talked about how fundamentals were something that they were focusing on during the bye week. But, I mean, you know, it makes you wonder, especially when he's, you know, on vacation in Nantucket, you know, what exactly is going on with his team. I mean, I think, yeah, you got to wonder, do you think, are there players on this roster, David, from what you've been told, that are starting to lose belief in Bill Belichick, or do you feel like everybody on this roster is still bought in?
There's definitive frustration. There was a lot of frustration in the aftermath of the Michael Lombardi letter to donors that this was a rebuild project, because that is not what these players were sold on. Mm-hmm. I think, look, again, these are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys, and I understand they're being paid a lot more than they ever were before, and we live in a different era, but there's still guys who have not, many of them who have not endured failure before because they were the best on their high school teams or whatever. They were recruited at a relatively high level. And so to then be dumped into this situation that is beyond their control in many ways about how bad it is, to have a spotlight on them unlike anything I'm sure any of them have ever endured because of who their coach is. And then to have basically the entire infrastructure be entirely transactional, where none of it is like, hey, I understand what we're going through here and we're behind you guys or whatever. Instead, what you've largely gotten from Belichick and the people around them is like, well, the players suck. What are we supposed to do? Like, if you're a player, how do you feel about that? That's not a great thing to hear. So, I think there's a lot of frustration. There is also a good bit of fear in that locker room of, I don't want to be the one who Bill Belichick is mad at. Because, look, I think a lot of the leaks that have come out and the frustration that has come out is not from players, but players' parents. And frankly, I heard this before the season, that there was anger about how players were being treated, how families were being treated by the coaching staff, how little access there was for media. So you couldn't even go online and read about how your kid was doing. There's a funny thing. You look at signing day, right? So what do most schools do for signing day? It's like they blow up each player that signs with them. Like, here's the thing, we're so excited to have this guy here, whatever. Carolina didn't want to do that because Belichick wants to preach its team. It's not individuals, but it's like, these guys still deserve their moments, right? And I think there's just a ton of simmering frustration. And then when the product on the field looks as bad as it is, and these guys have to keep going out in front of the media and answering questions that frankly, they don't have the answers to. It's hard to see how that isn't a powder keg that is getting the level of energy there that's ready to explode is just getting higher and higher every week with every loss. Now, all of that said, a win would do wonders to change the conversation here.
So that's the question. That's the one that I wanted to ask. Do you look at this schedule and think there are any wins out there for this team? Because, again, we've been, if you were competitive, I feel like you would feel like this is still a work in progress. But the fact that you haven't been competitive in any of your Power 4 games, and that's all you have remaining, I mean, is it possible that this team goes 2-10?
I mean, there's certainly beatable teams out there, right? Like, if you just said Carolina is a below average Power 4 team, there's teams on this schedule that they can beat. Like, Wake, as you said, Wake is a pretty frisky team this year, but they're not overwhelmingly talented. Cal, Stanford. Cal this week is a winnable game coming off of a bye for North Carolina if they're prepped for this properly. But nothing I've seen out of Carolina would suggest that they're better than any of the other teams in the ACC, even the really bad ones like Stanford. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was going back and looking at another team that's having some real struggles in year one is Charlotte, which Carolina played in week 2. Charlotte is 1-5 right now. Their lone win is over an FCS opponent. But if you look at the 6 games they've played, the team that scored the fewest points against Charlotte this year is North Carolina. And so it is, I mean, even the good stuff for Carolina is still kind of bad stuff right now. So that if you were saying the over under for the remainder of the season wins is a half a win, I'd probably take the over because I think they're going to steal one somewhere. But if you tell me they finish 2-10, I'm not the least bit surprised by it.
All right. Last question before we get you out of here. So we've heard people that basically say, look, Belichick's going to be here the rest of the year. I think we've settled on that. The question is, do you believe from what you've heard that he is going to be guaranteed next season, or is it still in the cards that they could move on from him this offseason?
What I've been told is it's a good bit more likely than not that he is back next year. But that said, we are less than half of a season into Carolina football this year, so there is so much that can still go wrong. If I am Carolina, and this is my, suggesting things, I don't have good reporting on this, but if I'm Carolina and we get to the end of the year and we are at 3-9 or 2-10, I am asking Bill for an accounting of what went wrong, and I am pretty much insisting on some staff changes. Does Bill Belichick say, I'm not changing my staff. I'm not doing that. I'll take off. I don't care. Like, do you force a situation that is such a conflict that Belichick wants to leave too? I think that's possible. I don't see a scenario in which Carolina is buying out the rest of Bill Belichick's contract at the end of this year, barring something where they can fire him for cause. And that's a really hard thing to do. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm a betting man, I think he's back next year. I don't feel great. Like, every fiber of my being of understanding how college football typically works says there's no way he could be back for next year. And yet everything about this situation flies in the face of what normalcy is. So, yeah, I mean, I think at least a little bit more likely than not that he's back next year.
Oh man, yeah. Well, hopefully things get better. That's all I can say. Hopefully things start trending in the right direction. Hey, David, thanks
for. The good thing about rock bottom is there's nowhere to go but up.
That's true. That's true, and it feels like we are certainly at that. I mean, this is rivaling probably worse than what we've seen under John Bunning, what we saw at the worst of Larry Fedora. I mean, it's just a complete mess. So. Hopefully things will get a little bit better. But hey, David, thanks for stopping by and talking with us here. David Hale, you can follow him on Twitter at @DavidHaleJoint. Make sure that you guys check that out. He is tremendous covering the ACC especially, but all of college football in general. So, anything you want to promote, David, anything you guys got coming up or an article that you have out right now?
I do a little show on the ACC network called Inside Access with my colleague Andrea Adelson. It is also available in podcast form, and we have been told we should, when on other podcasts, talk about our podcast, and that people should subscribe to it. So, it's Inside Access, and you can subscribe to it, and we'll talk about stuff like this, but other stuff too, and it's okay. It's not this good, but it's okay.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I've listened to it. You guys do a tremendous job over there. So we appreciate you taking out some time. Thanks for stopping by with us today, David. All right. All right, so there you go. I didn't realize I was on mute there. There you go. You guys, got a taste of the interview there with David Hale. Just, the national opinion on where things are at. A guy that covers the ACC, does a tremendous job of that. Make sure you check out their podcast as well. They do a great job of really covering the conference in depth, covering some of the big stories in the conference. And Carolina is going to be one that they're going to be talking about for a while here. As you heard from him, the expectation on his part is that, they're probably going to be running this back with Bill Belichick next season. This is probably going to be one of those experiments that lasts a little bit longer. So we'll see. I mean, in terms of the high school recruiting, I feel like you probably feel pretty good. But, I mean, the guy that Carolina just landed today, Kenton Dopson, said it best. He is locked into Carolina for now. That doesn't mean that there aren't other schools that could end up attracting him. It probably means there is a scenario where Carolina could be bad enough where he could look in another direction. So I think that is really going to be important. That's why Carolina's got to start getting some wins here on the field. Hopefully that is going to happen for Carolina here this season, just to get things back in the right direction, get some good juju back in this program, and at least get something that you can sell to these recruits on the recruiting trail to make sure that they stay a part of this class. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the podcast. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, guys, and check out everything that we've got going on over there. Oh, before we get out of here, forgot to mention them earlier in the episode, but our sponsor, Legacy Arcade. Make sure that you go over, check out Legacy Arcade. You can do it with the QR code right there. Legacy Arcade and Social Casino. It's a great place to play some of your favorite slot games, multiplayer fish games, as well as slot games, blackjack and roulette. I was trying to pull up the read right there on the fly. There you go. That's what live that's what live broadcasting will do to you sometimes. You can also win cash prizes to playing your favorite arcade games, as we mentioned there. Again, I'll run through them just really quickly. Roulette, blackjack, your favorite slot games, and multiplayer fish games. All you got to do is go to either that QR code or go to Legacy Arcade. You can find it if you just search it on Google and use the promo code HEELS and get up to $100 in free match play at registration. I love it. I've gone on there. I've played a lot of blackjack. That's been one of my things. I've also tried out the slot games as well. Those have been a lot of fun. It's just something to take your mind off of what's going on with this season and everything like that. Bet a little bit of money, but it's definitely a great way to do all of that. It's safe, secure, and has 24-hour customer support. So no matter what time of day you want to play it, you can. Instant redemption immediately to your bank account or card. Accepts all major credit cards, Skrill, and ACH. And they do have Apple Pay that is coming soon. So make sure you go over there, help us out, but also help them out over there at Legacy Arcade. All you got to do is use that promo code or scan that QR code right there. That will get you guys into the action. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Again, head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. We're going to have that article up there about Kenton Dopson that you guys are definitely going to want to check out. That'll go, a little bit more in depth than I was even able to go into here tonight, because I'm going to watch back his sophomore film to see if I can get any other takeaways about what type of player he is for you guys. But definitely a nice addition to the class. And we're going to keep you up to date on any other recruiting news that comes out around Tar Heel football. Could be some, here soon with some of the new guys that Carolina offered out of Penn State, or re-offered in the case of Jaziel Hart. Guys that, were committed to James Franklin, but now we're looking elsewhere because their head coach got fired. So we'll make sure that we are in on all of that stuff for you guys and keeping you up to date. And then, of course, on the field, we're going to have you ready for Cal. We're going to have the preview up on the website for you guys. And then most importantly, tomorrow night, right here on these same channels that you are watching this edition of the podcast on, the Facebook page, the Twitter page, the YouTube channel, we will have the preview for the Cal game. We'll go in depth for you. We'll give you keys to a Tar Heel victory. We'll give you our predictions for the game. So plenty of stuff for you guys to be locked in for tomorrow night as we get you ready for a Friday night tilt. Remember, this week it is Friday night. We are going on the same day that we normally do for previews, so it'll be a little bit of a shorter turnaround. But it is going to be a Friday night game for you, 10:30 out on the West Coast against the Cal Golden Bears. So make sure that you guys are checking that out on ESPN, and make sure you guys check us out tomorrow previewing that game for you. But for tonight, that's going to wrap it up once again for this edition of the show. Want to thank David Hale for stopping by with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.